November 16th, 1995. It's a chilly fall Thursday in Peachtree City, Georgia, a quiet suburban community a half-hour southwest of Atlanta.
Peachtree City was and is an affluent community. It has been ranked many times as among the most desirable places to live by Money Magazine.
You're close to Atlanta, but you also live away from some of the chaos that comes along with a big city.
But local resident Ray Little is deeply troubled when he walks into the Peachtree City Police Department early that afternoon.
He's there to report his girlfriend, Halima Jones, missing.
When was the last time you saw her?
It was yesterday.
Ray tells police that Halima has gone out shopping with her best friend, Ruby Joyner. But she did not return home last night.
I've been trying to call her, but it keeps going over the voicemail.
Even more worrying was the phone call Ray received a little before noon.
He gets a call from Ruby's husband, Lewis.
Hey, Ray, you seen Ruby?
He indicated that he had not heard from Ruby or Halima either. It appears that both women are missing.
Ruby Joyner was originally from rural South Carolina.
We're from a small little town that just got a stoplight maybe 5 years ago.
But as she got older, Ruby saw herself living a much bigger life.
She had decided that she really wanted to pursue a career in tech, which at that time was really a big deal. It was much newer.
Ambitious and fearless, in 1971, Ruby chased her dreams all the way to New York City.
She was determined to do whatever she wanted to do.
She enrolled in an executive training program with IBM.
Not only did the move jumpstart her career, it also led her to the love of her life.
She met Lewis Joyner, who is a very successful computer programmer. The two bonded over computers and technology.
But there was more to Lewis than just writing code.
He was not just smart, he was also charismatic. She loved the way he presented himself.
A native New Yorker, Lewis had grown up in Harlem.
He was kind of a straight-talking New Yorker. Not a tough guy, but someone who was no bull kind of guy.
And if he saw something he wanted, he went after it.
Think we can take you out to get a drink later?
I'd love that.
One date led to another. And before long, the couple had created a beautiful life together.
They were married and settled in the city.
Their marriage was always something special.
They were very excited because they were actually both living out their dreams.
And by the early 90s, the ambitious couple was ready for a new challenge and a new city, Atlanta.
It was really a great place for Black professionals.
There was a major boom of folks migrating from New York City down to Atlanta in the 90s. And many of these people were establishing businesses.
They landed in Peachtree City and bought a beautiful home.
Soon after arriving, the Joyners opened their own business, one that capitalized on the steady flow of people arriving in the booming southern metropolis.
They decided to start a moving and storage company. Lewis ran the business while Ruby helped in the office.
Hey, babe.
Hey, how did it go?
Really good. And we got their friends we're moving in a couple of weeks as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah, the information is on there.
Awesome. I will call them tomorrow and confirm everything. All right. Love you.
Within a few years, the business was booming.
They grew it to $2.3 million. That was super huge.
They had come to Atlanta and they had made it.
They were one of the fastest growing Black businesses in the whole United States.
The couple's business wasn't all that was thriving either.
Well, Atlanta is not just a great place for your career, it is also a wonderful place to socialize. And they quickly figured out that that was also important to them. And so they actually joined a social club. And that is where Ruby met Halima.
Halima was divorced with 2 children and worked in education. She was a middle school principal.
Ruby and Lewis both became good friends with Halima and her boyfriend, Ray Little.
Ruby and Halima bonded over their love of fashion.
They would shop together a lot and really just hang out and have a good time.
But now, their latest outing has ended in mystery.
According to her boyfriend, Ray, Halima hadn't come home last night.
At first, I thought they were out late. Then I get a call from her husband.
He was shocked to wake up and find that she still was not home.
Do you have any idea where they went yesterday?
I think so.
Halima wanted to go to a particular store.
Okay, and you were sure they were just going shopping?
Police do have to consider that maybe they made a choice to leave for some reason.
But Ray is sure that's not the case.
She had 2 young children that she really loved and cared for. They were her world.
Ray said that Halima would never just disappear.
But would Ruby's husband say the same about his wife?
After Ray filed that missing persons report, the detectives assigned to the case reached out to Lewis Joyner.
Hello?
When detectives reached out to Lewis, he was actually in New York.
Yeah, I've been really worried about her.
When did you last see her?
Yesterday.
The detectives asked Lewis when he left for New York.
I just flew out this morning.
Why would a man leave town while his wife is missing?
Ruby Joyner and her husband Lewis had built a beautiful life together.
They started out with just a simple moving and storage company that grew a super huge business.
They were living in the Atlanta suburb of Peachtree City and were happy.
But now, detectives are trying to find Ruby and her close friend, Halima Jones.
Halima's boyfriend, Ray Little, had gone to the police and reported her and Ruby missing.
The story is that these women had gone shopping and that they had disappeared.
However, when the detectives follow up with Ruby's husband, Lewis, things take an unexpected turn.
When did you leave Atlanta?
I just flew out this morning.
Why would a man leave town while his wife is missing?
Lewis insisted that it was a very important business trip and he couldn't miss it.
He had really kind of been scrambling to get ready and had not put a lot of thought into kind of the current circumstance.
Yeah, I just figured Ruby
had spent the night out with Halima.
Lewis says that once he had gotten to New York and still couldn't reach Ruby, he called Ray.
He said that it wasn't until he spoke to Ray and learned that Halima had not come home either that he actually started getting worried.
He said since he was out of town, he asked Ray to go to the police.
He thought that it would be more effective for it to be done in person opposed to him just doing it over the phone.
Okay, so I take it you haven't found them?
Not as of yet.
Okay. I'll try and get the next flight back home.
Thank you.
Once off the phone with Lewis, the detectives begin searching for the missing women.
Investigators start the investigation by going to the mall.
They were believed to be traveling there on the night that they were last seen.
But when they get there, they ask around, and none of the employees had seen Halima and Ruby.
The mall an apparent dead end. The detectives hit several other shopping centers in the area.
Once again, the detectives come up empty-handed.
No one remembers seeing them.
The detectives are really wondering if the ladies did, in fact, even go shopping that day.
But if Ruby and Halima hadn't gone shopping, where did they go?
At that point, they decide that it's probably best that they start to expand their search.
The investigators alerted their counterparts in Atlanta and other surrounding communities.
They issue a public statement to the media asking for any information.
They said to be on the lookout for 2 women. And they also gave the description of Halima's blue van.
It was not implying foul play, but anybody could read it between the lines that there might be foul play.
The public is on high alert as news of the missing women spreads through Peachtree City.
The disappearance of 2 women who were residents was big news and unusual.
One of the big attractions to Peachtree City was its low crime rate. So people had a sense of security. And so when these 2 women disappeared, it was scary to people.
With fear in the community growing, the detectives bring in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
The Georgia Bureau of Investigation assists local law enforcement agencies. And at this time, the Peachtree City Police Department wasn't a large department, and so we were contacted for our experience.
While the investigation gathers momentum, Lewis contacts Ruby's family in South Carolina with the news that she and her friend Halima are missing.
My gut told me something had happened to both of them.
It was totally unlike Ruby to just disappear.
Whatever happened, Ruby's family is determined to find her.
We all got in cars and came to Atlanta, and we went out. We went looking.
But as Ruby's family joins the search, the detectives are starting to suspect this case won't have a happy ending.
Since Ruby and Halima were supposedly going shopping, the detectives pulled their bank records and credit card statements.
But there was not any indication that the 2 had made any purchases.
This is alarming for the police at this point.
Something bad has happened to these women.
And there's no trace of the missing women until November 21st, 1 week after they disappeared.
A security guard spotted a van that matched Halima's in the long-term lot at Atlanta's Hartsfield Airport.
He approaches the van with a flashlight.
And when he shines the light inside, he makes a horrific discovery.
He sees a mound covered by a blanket.
And then he sees what he believes to be a foot sticking out.
One week after Halima Jones's boyfriend reported her and her friend, Ruby Joyner, missing, a security guard has located Halima's van in the long-term parking lot of the Atlanta airport.
And when he looked inside the van, he saw there was something in the back, covered by a blanket.
A foot can be seen sticking out from under the blanket.
Call 911. Send police here now. Long-term parking, row F.
Law enforcement floods the scene within minutes.
Atlanta police, Peachtree City police, and GBI all arrive on the scene.
After a week of searching, the 2 women's whereabouts is no longer a mystery.
Both Halima Jones and Ruby Joyner were located inside the vehicle.
The bodies of both women are piled together, covered by a very large blanket.
They were obviously victims of a murder.
Because of the state of the bodies. It was determined they had been dead for several days.
They were probably killed the night they went missing.
But they died in very different ways.
Halima had a singular shot to the back of the head.
Outside of the gunshot wound, her body was essentially pristine.
Whereas Ruby had been badly beaten.
She had facial contusions, blackened eyes.
Bruising on her neck also indicates that Ruby had been strangled.
It is remarkable that the two bodies were in completely different states. That's kind of a head scratcher.
Even more puzzling, there's evidence to suggest that the women may have been killed in a different location.
Ruby is covered in vegetation. It looks like she was dragged through some underbrush.
There was also signs of a struggle.
Ruby had on a camisole top, which was a little bit strange for that time of year, but it also looked as though there was the cuff of a black sweater around her wrist,
which suggested that the killer ripped off her sweater during the struggle.
But beyond that, the van offers little in the way of evidence.
There were no shell casings, there were no fingerprints, and there was no DNA evidence.
While the medical examiner's team removes the bodies for autopsy, the detectives contact Ruby and Halima's families.
We got a call like in the middle of the night, probably about 3 o'clock in the morning. They asked us if we can come to the police department. They didn't give us any information over the phone.
It's only when they're face to face that the detectives break the devastating news that both women were dead.
The whole thing was just it was just unreal. It's like something that you see on TV. It wouldn't happen to you. It happens to somebody else. This doesn't happen to my family. It doesn't happen to someone that we love. It was just hard. I hope to never have to feel what I felt that night ever again in my life.
The detectives also contact Halima's boyfriend, Ray Little.
Investigators asked him to come down to the station.
However, they were unable to get a hold of Ruby's husband, Lewis.
It was a big question mark. Where is he?
While the detectives try and fail to reach Lewis, the double murder becomes the top news story in Metro Atlanta.
It was on every news channel and covered extensively by the paper.
There was a lot of fear that two women who seemed to be straight arrows could come to this kind of end.
When the detectives sit down with Ray later that day, it's obvious that he's already seen the headlines.
He's absolutely devastated that Ruby and Halima are both dead.
I don't understand, how could this happen?
He says that they were really well loved in the community. He could not think of anybody that would want to hurt either of them.
But investigators wonder if he knows more than he's letting on.
He was the one who reported the women missing. But it's not unheard of that perpetrators of crime do that to try to take the heat off.
The last time you seen Halima was last Wednesday.
Yeah, like I told you.
And Ruby?
I don't know. A few days before.
But when police ask about his and Halima's relationship, the conversation becomes awkward.
He started to get a little bit uncomfortable.
Is it something you're not telling us?
Well,
he ends up revealing that he and Halima have actually recently broken up.
And the reason sounds a lot like a motive.
He believed that she was having an affair.
Questioned about the murder of his girlfriend, Halima Jones, Ray Little has just revealed that they had recently split up because he believed she was having an affair.
According to Ray, Halima had always been very friendly with a coworker named Howard at her school. She would speak to Howard on the phone. He ended up bugging the phone and listening to Halima and Howard's conversation.
Was she cheating on you?
I don't know.
He doesn't really hear anything definitive.
Still, Ray says he'd confronted Halima about what he'd heard.
What'd she say?
She said I should mind my own business.
After that, she was done.
She broke up with him.
But when the detectives ask Ray if that caused bad blood between them, he denies it.
He said they were actually amicable after their breakup.
If Halima was seeing someone else, could he be responsible for the murders? Or had Ray's jealousy sent him into a rage?
Look, I had nothing to do with this.
Ray is adamant that he really loved Halima and he would never do anything to hurt her.
Ray also claims he was working the day the women disappeared. And when the detectives check, it seems he's telling the truth.
His supervisor confirmed he was at work.
So the detectives bring in Halima's friend, Howard Cunningham.
What?
He is absolutely stunned and horrified at the suggestion that he might have killed 2 women.
He also denies having an affair with Halima.
Howard was adamant that they did not have a romantic relationship.
When was the last time you saw her?
Wednesday afternoon, the 15th.
After school, they chatted briefly and then went their separate ways.
That Wednesday, of course, was the evening Halima and Ruby disappeared.
And what did you do after work that day? I went home. You went home? I went home.
It may not be the most solid alibi, but at least Howard is cooperating.
Follow me out.
However, the investigators still cannot get a hold of Louis Joyner.
Investigators were very suspicious of him because of the circumstances of his departure.
Their suspicion of Louis deepening with each passing day. The detectives obtain a warrant to search the Joyners' home.
There was nothing particularly alarming.
But when they look through the books for Louis's business, something stands out.
Exactly what we were looking for.
The Joyners had been on the edge of bankruptcy for at least a few years.
Wow, that's it.
Could there be some correlation between all these debts and the murder?
With a hunch they're on the right track, the detectives next turn to a storage unit leased to Louis.
When they access the unit, they're surprised to find that it's filled with cocaine.
Had Louis turned to drug dealing to support his failing business.
Dealing drugs could provide a way for him to pay off some debts.
Got a lot in there.
We're gonna need crime scene tech out here.
But before detectives can even follow the lead about the bankruptcy and the drugs, they actually get a phone call.
Homicide.
The call is from a close friend of Ruby's.
She tells the detectives that Halima was indeed having an affair, but the affair was with Ruby's husband, Louis.
And according to her friend, Ruby found out.
Ruby was devastated.
Did she confront Louis about the cheating?
Ruby's friend did not know how Ruby planned to handle it.
Whether it was his drug dealing or the affair that triggered the murders, detectives believe Louis is the key to solving this case.
There was a nationwide manhunt to locate Louis.
When the drug evidence was found, a warrant had been placed for him.
And when they're contacted by a man in Atlanta named Gerald Douglas, the detectives sense they're closing in on the fugitive.
Gerald tells them that he and Louis have been friends for a very long time.
He says that he actually knows exactly what happened to Ruby and Halima.
The next morning, Gerald sits down with detectives.
Thank you for your help.
Yeah, please have a seat.
He starts off by telling them that he'd seen Louis less than 48 hours after Ruby and Halima disappeared.
Louis Joyner wanted him to come to New York.
He told Gerald that he needed some help.
So you flew to New York?
Yeah. Like I said, I've known Louis a long time.
Gerald says he'd met up with Louis at a bar.
When he got there, Louis told him that something bad had happened to Ruby and Halima.
He confessed.
He said he was responsible for murdering his wife.
But according to what Louis told Gerald, he didn't kill Halima.
Okay, so who did?
He told me it was Ruby.
A close friend of Ruby Joyner's husband has just told the detectives investigating her murder that Louis Joyner confessed to killing his wife.
However, he said that Louis told him that Ruby had killed Halima.
Why would she do that?
He said she found out that him and Halima had been messing around.
And according to what Louis told his friend, her rage over the affair had boiled over on the evening of November 15th.
The two women had gone shopping to the Shannon Mall and had arranged to meet Louis Joyner for dinner, and in fact did so.
Then, after dinner, they'd all driven out to a wooded area near the Atlanta airport.
The three traveled into this noise abatement area in order for Louis and Halima to consume some powder cocaine.
The women went in Halima's van,
while Louis had driven separately.
But Louis told his friend that once the three of them were alone, the impromptu party had taken an ugly turn.
Louis told Gerald that Ruby pulled out a gun.
Ruby, what are you doing?
Like I don't know. Ruby is not.
Louis said that she shot Halima Jones in the head.
He said that Ruby also tried to kill him.
She fired at him.
What are you doing? You crazy.
Filled with sudden rage, Louis wrestled the gun from her.
And then he killed her.
That's what he told me.
Louis said that he pistol whipped her and beat her to death.
But does the fact that Ruby allegedly killed Halima mean what Louis did was justified?
The injuries to Ruby Joyner is above and beyond anything that self-defense would require.
When you look at the autopsy report, Ruby was beaten extremely.
She had 23 breaks and fractures in her face. Her nose was broken, her eye socket was broken, her jaw was broken.
She was also strangled.
The medical examiner would call it rage overkill. It's probably the most significant intent you can actually have towards taking somebody's life. You want this person dead.
And he hadn't called Gerald because he wanted to confess his guilt. He wanted help getting away with it.
Louis wanted him to return to this area around the Atlanta airport and essentially clean up the crime scene.
Louis asked him to retrieve some things that he had left behind.
What sort of things?
He told me he lost his glasses.
Did you get him?
No.
Gerald said he refused to participate in helping Louis.
But Gerald is prepared to help the police.
Gerald agreed to lead detectives to the location where Louis told them the murders occurred.
We placed him in a vehicle and took him around areas of the Atlanta airport and attempted to locate the crime scene using a hand-drawn map that he had made when he had met with Joyner in New York.
When the detectives search the area, night has fallen.
We didn't know exactly where it was. We just kind of knew generally where it was going to be located. And we're examining the area with flashlights.
It's not long before the search reveals the first clues.
We started discovering shell casings up and down the street.
But it's not until the detectives find something else that they're sure they're in the right spot.
We found a sweater lying in the road.
It was a match for the torn cuff they found around Ruby's wrist.
They also find the items Lewis asked his friend to recover.
Items were found, including glasses that belonged to Halima Jones, and more significantly, a pair of prescription sunglasses that belonged to Lewis Joyner.
But there's still no sign of Lewis until November 29th, when an NYPD officer is making rounds in a city housing project.
The New York Police Department do what they call vertical patrols. They patrol the stairwells and the rooftops of these buildings.
The officer encounters a man hanging around on the rooftop.
He was acting suspiciously. I think he was drunk.
Initially, he was just going to shoo him off the rooftop, but I think they did end up patting him down, and they found some cocaine on him.
And when the officer tries to cuff him, a struggle ensues.
They almost fell off a multi-story roof.
That was a very dangerous arrest that was made by the officer.
But it's only after they bring him in that the police realize just how dangerous the suspect is.
He was wanted for murder in Georgia.
A police officer in New York City has just unknowingly taken a wanted fugitive into custody. 48-year-old Lewis Joyner.
He was originally arrested for possession of cocaine.
Once he was brought into the precinct, officers realized he was wanted in Georgia.
But by the next day, the news that there had finally been an arrest in the murders of Ruby Joyner and Halima Jones was all over Atlanta.
It was a pretty big story when he was arrested. He looked like he had been through it. He looked desperate, and everyone, of course, breathed a sigh of relief.
Although for Ruby's family, plenty of questions remain.
Even though it was over, we still didn't have the answers that we were looking for. We didn't know the why. Why did this happen? Did you really do this?
The detectives have similar questions.
We traveled to Harlem with a couple of New York City detectives and made contact with Lewis Joyner at that precinct.
He invoked his Miranda rights, so he did not provide a statement to us.
So all the detectives had is the story Lewis told his friend Gerald.
Not that they believe it.
The investigators charged Lewis with both murders.
The police think Lewis did the shooting and the beating.
Extradited back to Georgia, Lewis stands trial for the double murder in August of 1996.
He'd lost a lot of weight. It just made him look very old, very fragile. It wasn't the same man that I knew.
While prosecutors don't know exactly what happened, they theorize the crime was motivated by Lewis and Halima's affair.
Prosecutors based their theory off the belief that Ruby was the main target.
They assert that his plan was most likely to get Ruby out of the way so he could continue seeing Halima.
And after meeting them for dinner that night, he'd suggested the drive to a secluded spot near the airport.
What is this place?
Oh, this is where they tore down all the houses because it was too close to the airport.
It had been abandoned because there was so much noise that people just moved out, and it just was empty, paved streets, but no houses.
The story Lewis told Gerald about going out there to snort cocaine may have been true.
But according to the prosecutors, that wasn't all Lewis had in mind.
it's my belief that he's the one that introduced the weapon to the scene.
Lewis, what are you doing?
I love you, Halima.
He tried to shoot Ruby and hit Halima instead.
Maybe Halima stepped in the way.
But Halima's sacrifice didn't save Ruby.
Ruby ran into the brush and he pursued her.
The shots all missed, which explained the multiple casings at the crime scene.
Then, his gun empty, Lewis tackled Ruby.
He beat her down with the gun.
He beat her and beat her and beat her until he probably so tired he couldn't beat her anymore. So he choked her.
My aunt's face was like something in a horror movie. I couldn't even actually recognize her. Who does that? And who does that to someone that you say you love?
There was no doubt Lewis had beaten Ruby to death.
He'd confessed to his friend Gerald.
We also found Lewis's prescription sunglasses. So that clearly placed him at the crime scene. And just the vicious nature of the beating. It was a horrendous interpersonal crime. It was someone who knew Ruby Joyner, and that person was her husband.
When it's the defense's turn, Lewis takes the stand to maintain his innocence.
He sticks to his self-defense claim.
Now, I'll be honest, the attorney he had was a very good attorney because the way that they told the story, it made you almost wonder, did it really happen this way? Or could it have happened another way? I couldn't stomach it, and I didn't know what the verdict was going to be.
But the jury doesn't believe his self-defense claim.
He's convicted for killing his wife, Ruby.
But the defense did raise reasonable doubt as to whether he killed Halima.
Lewis is acquitted of all charges connected to Halima's murder.
The prosecution had theories as to how the crime may have occurred, but there was no conclusive evidence to dictate to us what really happened.
The state just didn't have the evidence to prove that Lewis pulled the trigger.
However, the acquittal doesn't change his fate.
Lewis is sentenced to life in prison.
Thank God he doesn't have a chance of parole.
But to many, justice wasn't completely served.
Halima was having an affair, but certainly didn't deserve to die because of it.
She's got sons. Her sons were very young whenever she passed away. She was a human being. I think it's unfair that nobody paid the price for her life.
And having Lewis where he belongs doesn't take away the pain for Ruby's loved ones.
She didn't deserve her life to end like this. Because of my Uncle Lewis, we'll never be able to talk to her again, smile with her again, have another family reunion with her.
But Ruby will never be forgotten, and her family hopes that her story will caution others.
If you're going through relationship issues, you need to really have at least one person you can talk to, share things with, so that they can understand what's really going on. And my aunt didn't want our other family members to even know that there was issues in their marriage. And that's probably why we didn't know what was going on. But you got to be strong enough to share with someone. They can help you get out of whatever the situation is.
There is a profound and unsettling silence that falls over a community when a child goes missing. It is not an immediate, deafening roar of panic, but rather a slow, creeping chill that seeps into the foundations of every home. In the expansive, sun-drenched landscapes of the American South, particularly within the bustling metropolitan sprawl of Texas during the early 1970s, this chilling silence became a protracted, agonizing reality. This is a story about the absolute shattering of suburban innocence. It is a narrative that forces us to confront the terrifying reality that the most monstrous figures do not always lurk in the desolate shadows or announce their arrival with an overt display of malice. Sometimes, the most profound darkness operates in the bright, unforgiving light of day, cloaked in a smile, a friendly wave, and an extended hand offering a simple, sweet gesture of goodwill. Between the years 1970 and 1973, the cities of Houston and Pasadena became the silent, unsuspecting hunting grounds for a predator of unimaginable depravity. Over this 3-year period, a horrifying shadow fell across these communities, resulting in the vanishing of at least 28 to 29 young lives. These were not random, chaotic disappearances. They were the calculated, methodical erasures of youth, orchestrated by an individual who had successfully woven himself into the very fabric of neighborhood trust. To truly grasp the magnitude of this tragedy, one must first understand the era and the environment in which it unfolded. The early 1970s in Texas was a period characterized by a sense of expansive freedom and community interconnectedness. Houston and Pasadena were growing rapidly, transitioning from quiet towns into sprawling industrial and residential hubs. Yet, despite this rapid expansion, the local neighborhoods retained a strong sense of intimacy. Neighbors knew one another. Children rode their bicycles freely until the streetlights came on. There was an unspoken social contract of mutual protection and collective safety. It was within this environment of implicit trust that the unthinkable began to occur. The victims were exclusively male, their ages ranging from 13 to 20 years old. This specific demographic represents a highly transitional and vulnerable phase of human life. At 13, a boy is just beginning to shed the dependencies of childhood, stepping cautiously into the broader world. By 20, he is a young man, asserting his independence, seeking out his own path, his own social circles, and his own adventures. They are driven by a natural curiosity, a desire for social connection, and a naive belief in their own invincibility. It is an age where the warnings of childhood begin to fade, replaced by a yearning for adult experiences. The predator operating in Houston and Pasadena understood the psychology of this age group with a chilling perfection. He knew that these boys and young men were not easily snatched from the streets by brute force. Such actions would draw immediate attention, spark widespread panic, and inevitably lead to his capture. Instead, he required a mechanism of attraction, a lure that would bypass their natural defenses and cause them to willingly walk into their own demise. The methods employed to draw these youths into the darkness were deceptively mundane. They were lured with the casual promises that appealed directly to teenage sensibilities. An invitation to attend a party, the offer of a convenient ride to a desired destination, or the prospect of playing games in a seemingly safe, welcoming environment. These were the everyday transactions of adolescence, interactions that occurred countless times a day across the state of Texas without incident. But in this specific, concentrated nightmare, these seemingly harmless invitations were the carefully laid traps of a serial killer. The boys who accepted these rides, who walked through the doors expecting a party or a game, were stepping across a threshold from which they would never return. The most terrifying aspect of the Houston mass murders is not merely the number of victims or the brutality of their final moments, but the identity of the architect behind this suffering. The mastermind of this unprecedented wave of violence was a man named Dean Corll. Born in 1939, Corll did not project the image of a hardened criminal or a societal outcast. To the residents of the Houston Heights neighborhood, he was a familiar, entirely unremarkable figure. He was a local businessman, a member of the community, a face seen in the grocery store or on the sidewalk. But Corll possessed a specific attribute that elevated him from a mere neighbor to a beloved local fixture, an attribute that he weaponized with devastating effectiveness. His family had previously operated a local candy store in the Houston Heights area. Although the business itself may have transitioned, the association remained, and Corll actively cultivated it. He became known throughout the neighborhood for his extraordinary, seemingly boundless generosity. He would frequently, and without expectation of anything in return, hand out free candy to the children and teenagers of the area. This simple, sweet gesture earned him a nickname that, in the context of the horrors he committed, stands as one of the most grotesque ironies in the annals of true crime. The children of Houston Heights affectionately referred to Dean Corll as the Candy Man. This moniker was his ultimate shield, an impenetrable disguise woven from the purest threads of childhood innocence. The psychological power of this persona cannot be overstated. In the collective human consciousness, a person who freely gives candy to children is universally coded as safe, gentle, and benevolent. He is the friendly uncle, the kind neighbor, the harmless eccentric. By adopting this persona, Coral effectively dismantled the protective instincts of an entire community. Parents who might otherwise be wary of a single, adult man showing excessive interest in young boys were disarmed by the wholesome image of the local candy distributor. The boys themselves, conditioned to view him as a generous benefactor, saw absolutely no reason to fear him. He was a friend. He was safe. He was the candy man. Beneath this carefully constructed, saccharine exterior, Dean Coral harbored a darkness that defies the boundaries of human empathy. He was a predator of the highest order, operating with a level of patience and calculation that is profoundly disturbing. He utilized his friendly demeanor and his access to the youth of Houston Heights to meticulously scout, select, and groom his victims. He recognized their vulnerabilities, their desires for independence, and their innate trust in a recognized community figure. While the city of Houston went about its daily business, while parents went to work and children attended school, Coral was silently orchestrating a massacre right beneath their noses. The sheer volume of his victims, at least 28 to 29 young lives completely extinguished, speaks to a sustained, unyielding campaign of terror that went entirely unnoticed by the broader society for 3 long years. It is a staggering number, representing a generation of local youth hollowed out and buried in secret. The dichotomy between the public face of Dean Coral and his private atrocities forms the central, horrifying core of this narrative. It forces the listener to grapple with the uncomfortable reality that evil is rarely overtly monstrous in its presentation. The most dangerous threats are those that successfully mimic safety. The Candyman did not break into homes under the cover of darkness. He was invited into the lives of his victims through the front door of trust. He did not chase them down in isolated alleys. They willingly accompanied him, completely oblivious to the catastrophic danger they were in. The tragedy of the Houston mass murders is amplified by this profound betrayal. Each victim believed they were interacting with a friend, right up until the moment the trap was sprung. The psychological horror of realizing that the friendly face offering a ride or an invitation to a party is, in fact, an architect of torture, is a nightmare that 28 to 29 boys had to endure in their final, terrifying hours. As we delve deeper into the harrowing details of this case, we must maintain a steadfast focus on the victims. They were not merely statistics or plot points in a macabre story. They were individuals with distinct personalities, dreams, and families who loved them. The loss of a child is a wound that never truly heals, but the ambiguity of a disappearance adds a layer of endless, torturous hope to the grief. For years, dozens of families in Houston and Pasadena lived in this agonizing state of limbo, staring out of windows, listening for footsteps on the porch, praying for a phone call that would never come. They searched the streets, distributed flyers, and begged for answers, completely unaware that the man responsible for their unending nightmare might be the very same man who casually greeted them on the street or handed a piece of candy to a neighborhood child. The profound suffering of these families is the dark, silent undertow of the Candy Man's legacy. The era of innocence in these sprawling Texas suburbs was essentially living on borrowed time. The illusion of safety, so meticulously maintained by Dean Coral, was inherently fragile, built upon a foundation of unspeakable secrets that could not remain buried forever. The sheer scale of his operations, the sheer number of boys vanishing into the ether, meant that a reckoning was mathematically inevitable. However, the revelation of this unimaginable truth would not arrive through a slow, deliberate unveiling of clues, nor would it be the result of a sudden breakthrough by local law enforcement. Instead, the facade of the Candy Man was destined to be shattered violently from within, collapsing under the weight of its own internal darkness. The end of this reign of terror would come rapidly and explosively, unearthing a reality so gruesome that it would permanently scar the psyche of the American public and redefine the nation's understanding of serial violence. But before that moment of explosive clarity arrived, the shadow of Dean Corll stretched long and undisturbed across Houston and Pasadena, a silent reaper harvesting the youth of Texas while hiding behind the sweetest of smiles. This horrifying saga serves as a grim historical marker, a point of no return for the communities involved. The psychological scars inflicted by Dean Corll extended far beyond the immediate families of the victims. They permeated the entire societal structure of the region. The realization that 28 to 29 robust, active teenagers could be systematically abducted and murdered without a single alarm being raised fundamentally altered how neighbors viewed one another. The trusted local merchant was forever transformed into a symbol of potential threat. The simple act of a child accepting a treat or a teenager accepting a ride from an acquaintance was suddenly fraught with paralyzing anxiety. The Houston mass murders did not just steal the lives of the victims. They stole the fundamental sense of security from an entire generation. As we prepare to examine the specific, harrowing mechanics of how Corll operated, the accomplices he manipulated, and the grim reality of the horrors inflicted upon those boys, we must first allow the immense weight of this initial deception to settle. We must sit in the uncomfortable silence of a community that looked a monster in the eye every single day and saw only a friend. This is the story of how the light of day can harbor the deepest shadows, and how the sweetest facades can conceal the most bitter, devastating truths. This is the story of the Candy Man and the Lost Boys of Texas. To understand the true tragedy of the Houston mass murders, one must look closely at the specific demographic targeted by the perpetrator and the environment that allowed these disappearances to go largely unnoticed for an extended period. The victims of this devastating crime wave were exclusively male youths, ranging in age from 13 to 20 years old. This is a highly specific, profoundly vulnerable period in human development that requires careful examination. At 13, a boy is shedding the immediate, clinging dependence of childhood. He is beginning to explore the broader boundaries of his neighborhood, seeking independence and deeply craving the company and validation of his peers. By the time he reaches 20, he is navigating the precarious bridge into full adulthood, often pushing boundaries, exploring new social landscapes, and harboring a deeply ingrained sense of youthful invincibility. Between these two distinct ages lies a vast expanse of transition characterized by an intense desire for freedom, adventure, and social belonging. In the early 1970s, in the sprawling, sun-baked landscapes of Houston and Pasadena, Texas, this desire for freedom manifested in ways that were entirely normal for the era, but ultimately fatal in the presence of a silent predator. The culture of the 1970s in Texas was infinitely more relaxed regarding the daily movements of teenagers than modern society. Hitchhiking, for example, was not widely viewed as a dangerous gamble with one's personal safety. Rather, it was a common, entirely accepted mode of transportation for young men who lacked vehicles but possessed a restless need to move about their city. They would stand by the sun-drenched highways and quiet suburban roads, thumbs casually extended, relying entirely on the implicit goodwill of passing strangers. Furthermore, the social lives of these youths revolved around informal gatherings, hanging out in local parks, riding bicycles across invisible neighborhood lines, and attending informal parties. They were inherently trusting, operating under a collective, unspoken social assumption that their community was a fundamentally safe space. They were looking for fun, for connection, and for a temporary escape from the mundane realities of school and adolescence. This inherent trust, this youthful naivete, was the primary vulnerability that Dean Corll recognized and exploited with surgical, merciless precision. The victims were not individuals engaging in high-risk criminal behaviors or living on the absolute fringes of society. They were ordinary boys, sons, brothers, and best friends engaging in the quintessential, innocent activities of American youth. Their disappearances, therefore, were a slow, silent hemorrhage rather than a sudden explosion of panic. Because they were of an age where running away, seeking employment elsewhere, or simply staying out late without permission was not uncommon, the initial reactions to their absences were often tragically delayed. Law enforcement agencies and even some devastated families initially assumed that these missing boys had simply decided to seek adventure elsewhere, perhaps joining the military, finding itinerant work in another city, or just rebelling against familial constraints. The tragic, hidden reality, however, was that their journeys had ended abruptly and horrifically within the very confines of their own community, their youthful trust betrayed in the most absolute and final manner imaginable. The sheer scale of this massacre, encompassing 28 to 29 young lives, presents a formidable logistical nightmare for a single perpetrator. Abducting, controlling, and ultimately destroying that many capable, energetic individuals without raising immediate, widespread suspicion requires a mechanism of deception that goes far beyond a friendly smile or a benevolent public persona. Dean Corll, despite his highly effective Candyman facade, understood the physical and social limitations of his age and position. A man in his 30s, regardless of how affable and friendly he appeared to the neighborhood parents, would inevitably arouse a certain degree of suspicion if he constantly tried to lure groups of teenage boys into isolated, private situations. He needed a bridge, a reliable way to bypass the natural, latent defenses of his intended targets. His solution to this complex logistical problem is perhaps the most chilling and psychologically devastating aspect of the entire case. Corll did not rely solely on his own charm or his history of distributing sweets. He constructed a deadly, efficient network of human procurement by enlisting the active help of two local teenagers, David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. The introduction of these two adolescent accomplices fundamentally changes the psychological landscape of the Houston mass murders, shifting it from a straightforward narrative of a lone predator to a complex, terrifying study in manipulation and peer betrayal. Brooks and Henley were not hardened, adult criminals brought in from the outside to execute a contract. They were local adolescents, peers, and in many tragic cases, actual friends or familiar acquaintances of the very victims they helped to condemn. This represents a betrayal so profound and unnatural that it defies rational human comprehension. Corll effectively weaponized the very concept of peer trust, turning the social glue of adolescence into a deadly poison. When a teenager is approached by an adult stranger offering a ride or an invitation to a private party, there is usually a natural, instinctual hesitation. The internal alarms, however faint, may begin to ring in the back of the mind. But when that exact same invitation comes from a boy your own age, a boy you recognize from the local diner, a boy you may have gone to middle school with or played neighborhood sports alongside, those internal protective alarms are completely and instantly silenced. The invitation is no longer perceived as a potential threat from an outsider. It is viewed as an opportunity for socialization, fully endorsed by a trusted, recognizable member of one's own peer group. Brooks and Henley provided Corll with an unfettered, pre-approved access to the vulnerable youth of Houston and Pasadena. They acted as the ultimate Trojan horses, bringing immense destruction directly into the beating heart of their own social circles. The psychological manipulation required to turn two local teenagers into active, willing participants in a sprawling serial murder ring is staggering to contemplate. Corll systematically preyed upon their own adolescent vulnerabilities, their desire for elevated social status, their desperate need for money, and perhaps a darker, latent sociopathy that he carefully nurtured, cultivated, and finally unleashed upon the community. The mechanism that bound Brooks and Henley to Corll, the dark fuel that powered this horrifying engine of death, was shockingly banal in its nature. It was a simple, cold financial transaction. Corll paid his young accomplices for their specialized services, effectively transforming the abduction and murder of human beings into a twisted, transactional enterprise. The grim price placed on the life of a young man in Houston during this dark period was approximately $200. For a mere $200, Brooks and Henley were entirely willing to scour their own neighborhoods, identify vulnerable, trusting targets, and deliver them directly into the waiting hands of a sadistic monster. This financial arrangement highlights a terrifying, absolute detachment from human empathy. To these teenage accomplices, their peers ceased to be friends, classmates, or human beings with bright futures and loving families. They were reduced to commodities, mere units of currency to be traded for cold, hard cash. The money provided by Corll likely funded the typical, mundane desires of adolescence: maintaining vehicles, purchasing clothes, securing entertainment, or simply enjoying the fleeting, intoxicating sense of power and independence that comes with having a steady, illicit income. Yet, the source of this income was a secret so heavy, so thoroughly dark, that it remains deeply incomprehensible how they managed to carry it while moving freely and casually among the very community they were systematically destroying. They walked the exact same streets as the desperate parents whose children they had essentially sold. They undoubtedly witnessed the frantic, tearful searches, observed the desperate flyers stapled to wooden telephone poles, and felt the growing, suffocating despair of their neighbors, all while knowing exactly where those missing boys were and exactly who had taken them away forever. This profound level of psychological compartmentalization, this unnatural ability to completely separate the mundane reality of their daily teenage lives from the absolute horror of their covert actions, speaks to a profound moral rot that Coral had successfully instilled within them. The $200 bounty essentially formalized a contract of death, turning the natural, everyday social interactions of adolescence into a highly effective, deadly hunting ground. The young accomplices became expert, cold-blooded fishermen, casting their invisible nets into the vibrant streams of local youth, knowing exactly what specific bait to use for each individual. They knew intimately who was eagerly looking for a weekend party, who desperately needed a ride across town, and who was simply bored and looking for any form of distraction. They weaponized their insider knowledge of the complex teenage social ecosystem to identify the most susceptible, vulnerable targets, ensuring a steady, uninterrupted supply of victims for Coral's insatiable, sadistic appetites. The specific methods employed to lure these boys into permanent captivity were deceptively simple, mundane, and horrifyingly effective, precisely because they leaned so heavily on the established normalcy of teenage suburban life. The primary triad of deception involved casual offers of parties, convenient rides, and engaging games. These were the absolute standard currencies of youth culture in the 1970s. An invitation to a party, especially one hosted by an older, seemingly permissive individual who might provide a space completely free from strict parental supervision, was a highly attractive proposition for a teenager eager to assert his burgeoning independence. Brooks and Henley would frequently act as the charismatic, enthusiastic promoters of these fictional events, approaching boys they knew casually and promising a genuinely good time, perhaps implying the illicit presence of alcohol or simply a relaxed, welcoming environment. The victims, inherently trusting their peers and seeking camaraderie, would readily agree, entirely eager to join the social gathering. Similarly, the simple offer of a ride was an incredibly powerful tool in an era where hitchhiking was a daily, accepted practice. Brooks and Henley, sometimes driving Coral's personal vehicle or accompanying him in the passenger seat, would spot a boy walking along a desolate stretch of road or actively hitchhiking and pull over to offer assistance. The friendly, familiar face of a peer grinning from the window would instantly dispel any lingering apprehension the boy might have had about getting into a confined space with an older male driver. It was presented as just a favor, a highly convenient lift to their intended destination, a simple gesture of suburban goodwill that perfectly disguised a fatal, meticulously planned abduction. Finally, the innocent lure of playing games or simply hanging out in a relaxed environment at Coral's residence was frequently used to gently draw victims inward. Coral's apartment was carefully presented as a safe haven, a cool, unrestricted place where kids could relax, play, and be themselves, far removed from the critical, watchful eyes of parents or teachers. The victims walked into these carefully constructed situations completely disarmed and unaware. They were not violently dragged, kicking and screaming from the public streets in broad daylight. They walked willingly, often with bright smiles on their faces, genuinely anticipating a fun afternoon or an exciting evening with friends. They crossed the fatal threshold of Coral's private domain, believing with absolute certainty that they were surrounded by friends and benefactors. This willing, eager participation is arguably the most heartbreaking and deeply disturbing element of the preliminary stages of these horrific crimes. The victims were tragically made complicit in their own entrapment, gently guided by the very positive social instincts that are fundamentally supposed to foster community, safety, and human connection. They had absolutely no way of perceiving that the exciting party they were attending was a grotesque masquerade, that the convenient ride they gratefully accepted was a definitive one-way journey to their demise, or that the innocent games they were enthusiastically promised were merely the deceptive prelude to hours or days of unimaginable, agonizing suffering. The carefully maintained environment of trust, the calculated manipulation by trusted peers, and the shockingly banal financial incentives driving the accomplices all converged to create a perfect, inescapable, and utterly invisible snare. The vibrant, growing areas of Houston and Pasadena were silently transformed into a vast, unacknowledged hunting ground, a place where the most dangerous predators wore the familiar, comforting faces of neighborhood friends, and the deadly bait was nothing more sinister than the simple, universally human desire for youthful companionship and joy. As the staggering number of missing boys quietly continued to climb, leaving a trail of shattered families in their wake, the broader community remained tragically oblivious to the systematic, predatory nature of the disappearances, completely unable to perceive the complex, deadly web that had been so meticulously woven right in their very midst. For 3 agonizing years, the official investigation into the vanishing youths of Houston and Pasadena was effectively non-existent, characterized by a tragic, protracted paralysis that was deeply rooted in the societal assumptions and logistical limitations of the era. Law enforcement agencies across the state were simply not connecting the disparate dots of these vanishing boys, primarily because the dots themselves were heavily obscured by the pervasive, comforting belief that these missing teenagers were merely chronic runaways seeking adventure or escaping strict households. During the early 1970s, there was absolutely no centralized national database for missing children, no rapid, interagency communication systems to highlight geographical clusters of disappearances, and no widespread psychological understanding of the highly structured behavioral patterns of serial predators operating within established communities. The devastated families of the lost boys were tragically left to conduct their own desperate, fragmented, and heartbreaking searches entirely alone. They spent countless weekends distributing handmade flyers on street corners, knocking on the doors of unsympathetic strangers, and chasing down incredibly vague, unverified rumors, completely unaware that they were exhaustively searching for ghosts who had already been permanently erased from the earth. The absolute lack of external investigative pressure meant that the terrifying, highly efficient criminal enterprise operated by Dean Corll, David Brooks, and Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. was free to function with total, horrifying impunity. They were not actively hunted by brilliant, dedicated detectives, nor were they chased by dogged investigative journalists looking for the next major headline. The powerful, protective shield provided by the friendly Candyman persona, combined with the seemingly mundane, everyday nature of the initial abductions, held incredibly firm against all outside scrutiny. If this intricate, deadly machine of human destruction was ever going to be permanently dismantled, the fatal blow would not come from a badge or a magnifying glass. The destruction would have to originate organically from the very core of the darkness that powered it. The sudden, shocking unraveling of the Houston mass murders was never going to be the result of a slow, methodical investigative breakthrough. Rather, it was destined to be the inevitable, explosive consequence of internal volatility, mounting paranoia, and the complete, catastrophic collapse of trust among monsters. The humid, oppressive summer of 1973 brought a suffocating heat to the sprawling coastal state of Texas, and with it a rapidly escalating, dangerous instability within the private, heavily guarded world of Dean Corll. The twisted dynamics of absolute control, psychological manipulation, and financial dependency that had successfully bound him to his 2 teenage accomplices for years were beginning to severely fray at the edges. By the month of August, the primary operations of this deadly trio had quietly shifted from their previous locations in Houston to a relatively modest, unassuming residential home situated in the neighboring working-class city of Pasadena. This specific house, much like all the previous apartments and residences Corll had occupied, appeared entirely unremarkable and peaceful from the quiet street. Yet it was darkly destined to become the final stage for a violent, definitive, and history-altering confrontation. The precise psychological triggers that ultimately led to Corll's complete mental and emotional unraveling during this period may forever remain a subject of dark, unresolved speculation among criminal psychologists. However, it is deeply evident from the historical record that his insatiable, escalating appetite for extreme violence was rapidly consuming whatever meager remnants of caution or self-preservation he still possessed. The carefully maintained, rigid boundaries between his benevolent public persona and his private, sadistic compulsions were completely collapsing inward. He was no longer functioning merely as the cool, methodical planner of these atrocities. He was rapidly becoming increasingly erratic, easily agitated, and dangerously unpredictable in his daily interactions. This sudden, rising tide of intense paranoia and unprovoked aggression directly threatened the very accomplices who had loyally, consistently supplied him with vulnerable victims over the past 3 years. The strict, unwritten hierarchy of the adult predator and his subordinate teenage procurers was about to be violently, permanently inverted in a matter of desperate seconds. The absolute breaking point of this grim alliance arrived without warning on the 8th of August, 1973. Elmer Wayne Henley Jr., heavily ingrained in the horrific daily routines of abduction and bodily disposal, casually arrived at the Pasadena residence on that fateful evening accompanied by 2 other friends. This seemingly simple, perhaps thoughtless deviation from their highly established, intensely secretive protocol became the immediate, volatile catalyst for complete disaster. The unexpected, unapproved presence of these specific individuals inside the private sanctuary of violence fundamentally enraged Coral to an unprecedented degree. His meticulous